everyone, and welcome to this edition of The Higher Estate. Of course, we're talking about all things related to medical cannabis, and we're bridging the gap between the medical world and the lifestyle world in a world that I'm calling mindful consumption. Today we have an absolutely, I'm honored to have a really awesome human here. I call him a human because people suck sometimes, but humans really try to be good and really make a difference in the world. And today we're going to be talking about sport and the use of medical cannabis and the use of other drugs or medicines or herbs or whatever it is in the sporting world. And today I brought on Rory McDonell. He's an MMA coach. He owns Parabellum. He's also an athlete. He fights and he continues to do so right up into our ripe old age, you know. He's got a beard. It's a good looking beard. I've got to definitely be older than you because mine is gray.
How old are you?
39.
39. I'm 36.
Okay. All right.
You're aging like a fine wine.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm going pretty gray, and it's driving me goddamn nuts. Shoot. Okay. Again, I'm gonna work on swearing. I may do it, but I mean today when we talk about, when we're talking about MMA and we're talking about testosterone, I feel like we can do that. Even estrogen.
You get a pass.
I get a pass today. All right, so I'm really excited to have Rory here. We're really lucky because in the last 2 years, sport has really come around to the idea of medical cannabis, but people have been using it for so long. Even most recently, up of September 2017, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, took CBD off the banned substance list, which means you can use, and this came after the initial Nick Diaz fiasco, and we can now use it. So I think that was a great start. So tell us about yourself. Tell us about what you do. I even want to know how you got into martial arts. And I know we've spoken about it before. It's a small world, and then how you sort of elevated yourself to the idea that medical cannabis is potentially a useful adjunct for athletes, both in recovery mode, both as an anti-inflammatory, whatever it is that brought you to, and how you're an advocate for it. Where did it all start?
Yeah, those are a lot of questions, so I'll try to
God damn it.
start my life story and go from there.
Can I start with your life story?
So I've been in combat sports, athlete and coach since I was about 13 years old. I started wrestling in high school. It was the first sport that I ever did that I felt good right away. I was an awful athlete, very mediocre at baseball, hockey, a lot of things that I tried to do. I worked hard. I've told this story before. Have you ever seen the movie Rudy?
Yeah,
I would have been the Rudy on every team. Like it's
love that movie.
This guy sucks, but he works hard, so let's keep him on the team.
Right. That's awesome.
We're wrestling.
Hey, I'm not much taller. All right, I'm
tall enough. I'm tall enough.
All right.
But I started wrestling, and it made sense to me. And then through university, I started moving into martial arts more, and I fell in love with it. I really like to fight, and that sometimes has a negative connotation. People think you're a thug. I'm not a thug at all. I train hard. I think about this a lot. It's an extremely cerebral sport that I spend a lot of time studying and thinking about for myself and for my athletes. You mentioned earlier that I still fight. I don't actually fight. And this is actually a personal pet peeve of mine. I grapple competitively now, and the reason that matters, I've been in real fights. I've been punched and kicked in the face. You can probably tell by the way I look. If I'm not getting punched and kicked,
really, I mean,
and my nose and some of the other...
Yeah, but we all have the broken noses. But I mean, somebody needed to drain those early on in life.
I drained these every day.
Really?
Every day. But the thing is, I was getting ready for a fight, and you can't take time off training. So what they used to do, actually, this is old school medicine.
Sound like
they used to sew buttons into your ear to keep the pocket closed.
So old school. We used to do that all the time.
They won't do it anymore.
No.
They won't do it anymore. So I got an insulin syringe, and I drained it every day, but then I'd still go in, and so I end up with these awesome... scarred up, broken ears.
Yeah. Okay.
But that actually leads to something that you asked about, the pain that you go through as a fighter. There's constant damage, and you make those choices all the time. I have a serious injury, but I also have a fight coming up, so I'm going to make the decision to train anyways and kind of deal with the consequences.
That's what athletes have to do.
That's what athletes have to do. It is. And with combat sports in particular, even if you're very good at it and you're doing it correctly, it still hurts.
Yes.
Right? It's what I always say, if you swim, you're going to get wet. You play hockey, you're going to be cold. If you fight, it's going to hurt. There's no way around it. You have to be comfortable with that idea.
You get wet when you swim?
Yeah,
that's new.
That's new. I've never wrapped my head around that.
Right, you're going to get hurt, no matter what it is.
So you have athletes that then are starting to look for pain management, and the pain management that's available is often more damaging than what they're doing themselves. I'm not going to mention names, but I've run into well-known athletes that I've dealt with that are opiate addicts. There's no other way to describe it. Beyond the end of their career, they retain the addiction to some of those painkillers.
I'll tell you for myself, when I used to work with pro athletes in the football world, after a game, they would come in and they would expect their opioids. They'd expect their Tylenol 3s. They'd expect their Percocets. They'd expect even benzos, which are benzodiazepines, like muscle relaxers. Yep. They wouldn't even know the names. They say, "Doc, can I get the home plate?" Because it looks like a home plate. and you're sitting there. Nobody is, and they grow up through the system just seeing this stuff doled out. Right. So how do you make that change? Where does the thought process come into you? Hey, maybe there's another alternative, and how do you sit on a forefront, or how are you okay trying to coach an athlete and tell them it's okay to use something else, and how do you counsel them on opioids? Like, what do you do?
I tell them to stay away from it completely.
Yeah. Okay,
even something like ibuprofen. If you use ibuprofen every single day for years, there is a tangible damaging effect on your body.
Yes.
And that's more where I was. I never liked painkillers for some of the reasons we've just discussed. It was also mental with me. I like to win those little mental victories and say, okay, I'm going to push through this. I'm going to deal with this discomfort as part of my
the mental stamina,
the mental training. And that's, I mean, not everybody gets to that point. But when you present something that could be helpful in managing pain, helpful in managing inflammation, that doesn't have long-term addictive properties, that's maybe more beneficial to your body, why wouldn't I explore that or advocate that for that as a coach? That makes sense. This sport is damaging enough.
Right.
If we can take the edge off that in a safe, healthy way, of course. Sure. I'm open-minded to anything that's going to help my athletes recover safely.
What do you think the defining moment, one of the defining moments that Nick Diaz comes out? I think that was probably one of the defining moments. Maybe
he was
I'm
the
wrong.
first guy that was willing to put his name and his reputation on the line as an advocate for something like CBD. And CBD is not psychoactive, right? So there's no you're not getting high. There's no recreational component.
Right.
And I think the fiasco you're talking about is where he busted the vape pen out in the post-fight press conference.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's the USADA rules say that you can't have any kind of intoxicant for 4 hours after a fight, or you're in violation. And he did that deliberately within that 4-hour window so that he could talk about it, and so he could talk about the fact that it wasn't psychoactive and that it was helpful. Right. And as I understand it, that directly led to reevaluating CBD as a banned substance.
It did. So that's basically one of the. I mean, that was one of the niduses that pushed it all forward. I mean, I give Nick a lot of credit for coming out to do that. Whatever his intention was it, hey, I'm a thug, here we go, or was it, and I don't care, which he just recently did. Or if it was, I'm going to make a point to say we have an opioid problem here, and like you said, even NSAIDs, even something like Advil, you use it long, it's going to wreak havoc on your kidneys, it'll wreak havoc on your gut lining, and using it over a long-term period can have detrimental effects to you. And there's some people that can't use it altogether. But something like CBD, which cannabidiol, which has no antipsychotic or no psychotic properties at all. Actually, it's an antipsychotic. It helps as an antipsychotic.
Yeah.
But it also works like an opioid and like an anti-inflammatory combined together. So why not do that? So if that was the reason that he came out, then kudos to him. Like that's fucking awesome.
Even if it wasn't deliberate, like you said, I mean, he is rough around he's rough around the corner, or rough around the edges. My inclination is probably that it wasn't to start a dialogue about it. That was probably more, I'm going to do whatever I want because I'm one of the Diaz brothers. But it did inadvertently maybe start a dialogue that I think is really valuable.
So what do you think What do you think addiction is like in the sporting world? I mean, you come to our world, you know, from a medical perspective, and I did, you know, a fellowship in sports medicine, and so I see this stuff on a daily basis. Addiction is real, especially around footballers and around athletes, but they have no education.
Yep.
So what's happening in, you know, and now that MMA is so huge, and it's like you said, it's a painful sport. There's no way around. I mean, I played baseball the other day and I pulled my hamstring. All right, so and I can't walk. But this sport, you're getting your face punched every day. You're getting your legs, and even if you're doing it appropriately and it is a sport. And you said actually, okay, I want to come back to the idea of fighting. You said the word. Let's not call it fighting. Ground grapple.
Grappling is different.
Right.
You're not in a fight. It's a grappling match, and I love it.
It's a chess game.
It is, and I love the sport. I love the sport.
But you can still get injured.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
You get some of the worst injuries I've had were from being in ankle locks.
Yeah. Like, the difference is. You are specifically targeting aspects of the body to damage, right? That's what a submission is. Like when I put you in a leg lock, I'm trying to threaten to tear the ACL, and if you tap out, I don't. But if you're late or you don't get the opportunity, I will tear that ACL like wet newspaper, right? Like that's what a heel hook does.
Right.
Done.
Yeah.
So yes, even in grappling, which is it's called the gentle art, but it's
only gentle if you tap.
Exactly.
It's not so gentle if you don't tap.
So there is the potential for real injury, for sure.
So what do you do? What do you see in your gym for people who are who have pain? What are they using? And do you recommend using cannabis as a coach? Take away the athlete. You're a proponent of cannabis, right? Am I correct if I say that? Both the THC and CBD, which is totally cool to say, because I think both of them have healing properties.
Yeah.
And as a lifestyle, it's still healthier than drinking alcohol. And,
of course.
You know, we all like a scotch. Who
doesn't?
I feel like I should have had scotch here. Instead, we have kombucha. You know, this is our go-to.
It's a little scotchy.
It's actually not bad, right?
It's not bad.
It's pretty good. Yeah. So, what do you do for your athletes? How would you counsel them? And do you see addiction presenting? And how does it present? And what do you do?
So I'll address the addiction side first because this is actually a conversation I've had with my dad a number of times. There is a history of addiction in my family. There's been some alcohol and drug abuse on both sides of my family. There is definitely a genetic component, I think, to addiction. And I see an addictive personality in both my dad and I, and also in a lot of the fighters that I
think
train.
that leads us to fight. Like
I think the compulsion to do something over and over and over again can be a good thing or a bad thing. And my dad's always said, let's find something healthy and good for us and ultimately beneficial to pour ourselves into so that we don't get drawn into drugs and drinking or gambling or whatever you can get addicted to. Where I see it start to become a problem.
All the fun things in life.
It's all exactly.
Sorry, you're like drugs.
Just in moderation. Just in moderation. And then you get addicted to the more beneficial things, hopefully. But when you move past that. So I'm 36. I'm moving into a part of my life where I'm going to be fighting less. I still train. I still compete in grappling. But what if somebody doesn't do that anymore? And they've gone from this is what they do every day. They've got a very regimented lifestyle that they pour themselves into, and then that's gone. There is still a compulsion there. And I see that oftentimes leading to addiction. And when you couple that with people that have been using opiates medicinally, maybe even correctly to mask pain or
most addiction presents. I mean, they've been prescribed it at one point or another, and we see that all the time. That's what it is. And my doctor gave me this because I sprained my ankle. We know that opioids for broken ankles and stuff. I mean, for strains and sprains, it's not all that helpful. And compared to even to NSAIDs, we just have a study that was just published, and they're almost equivalent to use in the emergency department. But most of them do. My point being is most people do start. You said even being used appropriately. Addiction still presents even when it's appropriate.
When it's
That's
been prescribed.
the problem.
Yeah. And
so what do we do for athletes? What do you do?
You then lose control of that afterwards, right? That becomes kind of the defining feature. And I've had 2 people in my life die from opiate-related deaths that were professional athletes, professional fighters, and lost control of that afterwards. And it's heartbreaking. It has impacted me personally.
Certainly.
So if I have an athlete approach me, I will push them away from that. I look at holistic.
What do you do? Like in your place, you have a naturopath.
We do. We have a naturopath. I brought a nutritionist in. One of our professional fighters, Aaron Jeffries. Fantastic guy, knows what he's doing, knows how to get people eating clean, helping reduce inflammation through diet, advocating for intelligent training so that we're not going in saying, okay, we're doing 6 sessions today as hard as we can every day until this fight. Training smarter, not harder.
We are.
Some of these guys, you got to pull back pretty hard on the leash to get them to be that way, but that's my job as a coach, right? I've said that before. If fighters are supposed to say, yes, I want to do this, coaches are supposed to say no.
Right.
Pull back a little bit. This is what we're going to do.
You're coachable if you can say yes and just keep saying yes.
Exactly. That's what I look for in an athlete. That's a little off topic, but somebody if they offered you a fight against the world champion in your weight class tomorrow as a fighter, you should say yes, absolutely, I want that fight. And maybe as a coach, you say, let's look for a better opportunity than the toughest guy on earth right now.
So you're you're in an important role. So you play an important part in these people's lives when they'll come to you and say, what should I be doing? Or I have an addiction, or I have a problem. What do you do?
So if it's dealing with pain, I will absolutely advocate for things like CBD. That seems like a no-brainer for me to get them reducing inflammation and dealing with pain. What was the other component of that question? I
don't know. Paying any fucking attention to what I was saying. Just ask a goddamn question.
I'm just talking.
You turn it back on me now. I don't follow along. No. So how do you counsel? How do you counsel people? You're as a coach, you're a counselor. Man, you're everything.
Yeah, you are.
You've got type A personalities that just want to go and they have that need for something, and it's that addictive personality that drives them to be a pro, to be perfect. How do you take that person and counsel them away from using opioids? Say, hey, just don't use it, or are they coming to you and they're still using it because it will impair them?
So I've actually, what's funny? I've had one athlete that came to me and was honest about opiates, and I was able to work with him to move away from that. I gave him some work that we could do together that didn't aggravate the injuries that he had, so he still felt like he was doing something. So now we're not trying to deal with this agonizing pain every day. We can work around it. You've got a torn hamstring right now, so let's focus on our boxing. We'll throw hands. We'll be really careful with that hamstring. You can come into the gym and do work without aggravating that.
So do you think it's important to bridge? Maybe that's a bridge that most people aren't crossing. Maybe if I was to go into a gym, and or you're to go into your own gym and start talking about these things, maybe we need to raise that vibration a little bit and start bringing awareness to the idea. And so the question is, how do we bring that awareness? I think one of the ways that we do it is, that you can do it in general is when you're having the discussion, because I can guarantee you that most of the athletes that come through you and that go through any MMA gym or any sport in general a lot of them are going home and they're taking a Tylenol 3 or they're taking codeine and they're taking something, and we're just not asking the question. And those people are being missed. So I think maybe one of the ways is that we bring that question, we bring those things up. Maybe it's time to talk about that, maybe that's what the whole point of Nick Diaz was. What other MMA fighters do we know that are sitting out there using? There's
a lot. There's actually a lot. It's funny. I was when I knew that I was coming on the show, I did a little research and looked at guys that have lost fights because they tested positive for cannabinoids. I know that we were discussing beforehand Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan. They're huge in the MMA world.
Right.
Eddie Bravo is an advocate for cannabis as a training tool. So this is beyond what I'm comfortable with. But he would have guys smoke before they do jiu-jitsu with the idea that it's going to make you more relaxed and creative and open-minded on the mat.
So I'll just comment on that. So cannabinoids act in sport and on the physiology. Our body produces its own cannabinoids, right? Which are master regulators of our bodily function. So they're going to affect everything from our brain to our toes. When it comes to focus and it comes to attention, we have, which is a combination of, I actually wrote an article on this. I think it's on Facebook. I can't remember where. It may have been for a Yahoo thing. Yahoo. How do you pronounce that? Yahoo? It's still around? Is that a thing? It's okay. It's not Google anymore? I don't know. Anyway, so it just dated me, but only a couple of years. Anyway, so attention and focus are a combination of multiple areas of our brain, usually regulated by dopamine and serotonin. Cannabinoids act synergistically with dopamine and with serotonin, and in some cases can decrease or I guess increase the amount of serotonin that's not reabsorbed. So it keeps it hanging around longer, so your attention and your even creativity would be improved. So cannabinoids can actually do that. Mostly, it's actually a combination. Both THC and CBD will do that. So that's one of the reasons why I think that people say, hey, I feel hyper-focused with this. Some people will go to sleep, but other people feel hyper-focused. I think one of the detriments would be the muscle relaxation at that point in time. What you want during activity is you want to feel you want to feel more focused, and you want to feel more in control. And I think through the mechanisms of dopamine and serotonin and the synergistic effect of the endocannabinoid system, which is our own inherent cannabis we produce, the same stuff that's in the plant, we're able to do that. Sometimes we have a deficiency in that endocannabinoid system, where if we use the exogenous cannabinoid or we use the cannabis that comes from the plant, I know I'm using my hand because I'm thinking, listen, okay, I'm a bud tender. What am I? A bud tender? I'm pulling them off the plants. I'm drying it now. And we have the ability to alleviate that deficiency and improve our serotonin and dopamine reuptake, which will then improve whatever focus. I think that might be the reason. Anyway, that's the physiology behind it. I don't know. But I know that Joe Rogan is a huge proponent of the use of cannabis. But the question is why? Do they have the science? Do they know why they want it? Or are they just saying, hey, it works? Or what are you hearing in your world? Because it seems like MMA is leading the charge on this.
It does seem to be. The way I feel about it, and you made references, the muscle relaxation, I think it can sometimes lead to a lack of focus. So I'm not entirely against the idea. I don't want it on the mat. I wouldn't want it on the mat any more than I'd want people to have a couple of glasses of scotch before they come in to train. And is that really that big a deal? Probably not. I think it generates the wrong atmosphere on the mat, and it's not what I want my athletes doing. But
are you okay with them taking an opioid and coming on the mat?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
All right.
That's actually much worse.
Yes, certainly.
Much worse for a couple of reasons. I think it makes you dopey, one.
Yeah,
but two, we talked earlier about tapping out.
Yeah.
If you're limiting your ability to feel pain, you are damaging joints beyond where they would if you weren't.
Right.
I don't want people inebriated when they're training. Period. Good. Now, if they say that they find that they what I'll do, because I do smoke recreationally as well. I'll go home, smoke, and study. That works for me. I'll watch tape.
It makes you
I'll
super
study fights.
cerebral.
It gets me into a different mind frame, and I'm, like you said, I think I'm a little bit more able to absorb some ideas, or it gets me thinking a little differently. That works for me, and that's not on the mat. That's not going to impact my training. But at the same time, playing devil's advocate, Eddie Bravo has produced some very, very good, legitimate grapplers from his program and from his system. He himself, where he made his bones as a grappler, he was a no-name, and he got into the Abu Dhabi Combat Challenge, which is like the Olympics of grappling, and he beat Royler Gracie, and Royler Gracie at that time was Michael Jordan. He was the guy, right? And Eddie Bravo tapped him out.
I saw some real fights of that guy too.
He's tough.
He's tough.
The Gracies are, they didn't evolve as quickly as some of the other martial artists, but they were always tough, and they come from a background. Do you know anything about the Gracies? You know Helio Gracie?
Yeah, I mean, I just watched some of their stuff.
So Helio Gracie, I love this guy. He weighed 130 pounds soaking wet, and he put an ad in the Rio paper saying, if you want to get your ass kicked, show up to my address, and I'll beat you up. Open invite in Rio de Janeiro in the 50s, which is a third world country, to come fist fight. Like, I like that.
Rio is probably one of the most dangerous cities on our planet.
Another quick story about, you've ever heard of Kimura, the submission? So
thank you.
I'm just being, we'll say that's for the listeners. I'm a dick.
No, that's Andre today, just saying.
Oh yeah, we'll chat about Andre.
Well, he's right here. It's about
there's an empty mic.
Anyway.
So Kimura is a shoulder lock. Helio challenged the judo heavyweight champion of the world, a guy named Kimura, to a fight. no holds barred Vale Tudo fight. So they fought, and he had his shoulder broken in the shoulder lock. After it was broken, after it broke, he tapped out as a sign of respect, and then again as a sign of respect, they named the submission after him in the system.
That was a Kimura, but yeah,
it's badass.
Yeah,
it's badass. I like how they approach.
That's crazy.
Honor and
of course.
and fighting. It's one of the best things that I think they brought to martial arts.
If you would have had cannabis, you probably wouldn't have felt it either, and probably keep it off the mat.
So that's actually a good question. Do you think because the only real compelling reason I've heard for cannabis being judged as performance enhancing is that there is a pain masking component to it, and they said the same thing about cortisone shots.
Yes,
where if you get a cortisone shot, that's considered a performance enhancing drug, even though it isn't, but it masks pain to the point where that either puts you in harm's way or gives you an advantage because you're not feeling it as much.
So I think CBD we can take off the table for that. It's an anti-inflammatory. I guess the question is Advil considered a performance-enhancing drug? You can use Advil.
Yep.
It's not listed. Tylenol is not listed. Certain like pseudoephedrine is listed.
Yeah, of course.
Things like that, but those can all improve performance. It does mask pain. It has the potential to mask pain. It doesn't. It just makes you not care about it. Actually.
Yeah.
At least THC can help you not care about your pain. Question is, does THC, if it has the potential to improve focus and improve agility and it improves motor performance, I mean, specifically in people that have a movement disorder, it can improve those things. Can that be considered a performance enhancing drug? Well, is caffeine a performance?
I would say absolutely it is.
Right. So is caffeine on WADA? No.
Nope.
So if you can use caffeine, then you should be able to use it because it acts similarly.
I don't disagree. Actually, the first time I heard this, so I was in university a while ago, 15 years ago, which is shocking to say for me out loud, anyways. But I remember going. I was a competitive
Where'd you go
wrestler,
to?
University of Guelph. Yeah, I wrestled.
You wrestled at Guelph.
I did. Yeah.
I played rugby. I wasn't, but not for Guelph. I was at York.
Rugby's a great sport too. I work as I go into with a high school team and I work as a tackling coach.
Oh, great!
Because a lot of it is so similar to wrestling. It's a lot of fun. I love rugby. One of my favorite team sports.
Yeah.
But I remember they had a seminar with a doping agent that kind of was explaining what we could and couldn't do and why. And he said at that time, he said, this is ridiculous, but they've recently taken the upper limit off caffeine in terms of the amount of caffeine that you could have. And he said they have left, and I know it's changed since then, but they've left the limit on cannabis. And he said, from my point of view, he said he said you have to follow these rules because you are an athlete and they make those rules. But he said from my point of view, this is totally backwards. This doesn't make sense. Caffeine has measurable improvements on performance across the board, and cannabis it just doesn't fall in the same category.
It doesn't, and it doesn't even. I can't even tell you that it has measurable improvements on. Like,
it has the potential to maybe.
Yeah, I mean, or you just sit in your couch and, and you're just like, where are the Cheetos, buddy? No, but the question is, why does it do that? It actually improves your hunger mechanism. So interesting. Okay, well, here's some more science.
Science.
Yeah, here's the science of cannabis when it comes to weight loss. Actually, THC is pretty good at helping maintain weight loss because it improves pancreatic function. It improves glucose metabolism. THCV, which is one of the metabolites of cannabis. Of THC, it actually improves weight loss. Now, it's hard to create THCV, but CBD does something very similar. By improving self-functioning in islet cell of the pancreas, you improve glucose metabolism. There's a couple studies on it. In fact, the one that I'm thinking of, I can't remember the name offhand, but those who were using cannabis had 16% decrease in glucose resistance, in a glucose resistance challenge. No, 16% lower fasting glucose and a 20% improvement in glucose resistance.
Okay.
Thank you. I pulled that out. You're welcome. Thank you. That's as far as my brain can go today. I'm now done. Fuck it. Here's a penny for the jar. I don't have one. But, oh, by the way, we have a jar. This is our own. So every day we're going to have one part new to this swear jar. One, I've decreased my swearing like immensely since in the last little bit, right? I think we can all agree to that.
I think we count on one hand, so the swears so far. That's pretty good.
I think I've only sworn once. I just swore.
Well, you said goddamn it right at the start.
Shit.
And you just swore again.
Oh. Okay, but anyway, the bottom line is today we have a swear jar, but no money to go into it. So next time we'll have the money. All right? Every day we're just going to improve. Okay, so the bottom line, I don't even remember how this came up, but we were talking about improving how I was talking about couch lock that you can get from cannabis, which is really the muscle relaxation part that you get from it. So you don't want to use it on a mat, which I totally agree with you about. You get improved even though you may eat more, so it's really good to improve appetite, and it's great for people that have a problem eating, and we use it all the time in cachectic patients or patients that have hepatitis C or HIV and have eating difficulties, because it improves your hunger mechanism. So mostly because it improves smell, and we know that smell is a function of your entire brain pretty much, and through smell you improve your hunger mechanisms start going. You get those hunger pangs, and so you may eat more, but if you eat more, one, it should be healthy, of course, whatever you do eat, but your glucose metabolism is improved, so you aren't going to gain all that weight, unless, of course, you're eating junk. Of junk. But anyways, that was totally aside. I don't even know where we were talking. I was talking about couch lock. Totally offside. But point being that we just have to be using cannabis on the mat can cause muscle relaxation and does improve hunger mechanisms, but I don't know why we're still talking about that. I'm totally perseverating on hunger today. Usually it's haircuts, but you don't have any hair, so we're good. I don't have to talk about haircuts. So no, it's good.
That was cold-blooded. That was cold-blooded. Hey, you know what? I would take a little salt and pepper in my beard to have a full head of hair.
I would take your beard and take no hair.
That's a terrible trade-off.
No.
This takes a full second off my 100-meter time, though.
That's right. And in the pool when you're swimming.
That's right.
It just falls right off your aerodynamic.
I'm not built for swimming.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, I'm not either. I still try it.
I swim like a brick.
Yeah, right. I hear you. Me too. But I still love swimming. I don't know. Do you swim? I love swimming.
I don't like the water.
Oh, you don't?
No, I'm like a house cat.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't like water?
I don't like water.
Why not?
Well, this is getting...
Get personal.
Okay, I didn't drown when I was 11 years old. I was at a summer camp, and I took a sailing course at this summer camp. And then one of these other idiot kids steer the rudder, and he pushed it so far to the left that the boat capsized. Oh. And I was stuck under the boat. No danger whatsoever of drowning. I had a life jacket on, and I was underwater for less than 30 seconds. What camp
was that?
But there was a moment where the life jacket had pushed me up against the base of the boat, and I was looking straight down, and I could see the mast going 30 feet into the water, and then sunlight hitting the sail all the way down and beneath that blackness. And it was probably in my formative years memory-wise, and I had nightmares until I was like 35, which is right now.
Pure PTSD. That's what it is. That's what nightmares. That's how it happens.
Maybe. I've never actually thought about it that way, but I've just never enjoyed water since.
I have the same problem from Jaws.
From Jaws?
Yeah. No. Seriously. Yeah. No. I did this similar thing. I watched Jaws, and I can't even take a bath because I think a shark is coming out of the drain.
Yeah.
Like so.
You know. Actually, the other one. This is. You ever see the movie Arachnophobia?
Yeah.
So there's a scene where the spiders come out of the shower head. For 5 years after I saw that movie, I could not turn my back to the shower head just in case. Just in case a spider came out, because looking at it is going to make a difference too, right? I
think our entire generation has been ruined from those two movies, from Jaws and Arachnophobia.
This also is not the toughest podcast I've ever done. We're getting really real about.
Yeah, about.
I thought this was going to be about like testosterone and fighting and stuff like that.
Okay, so let's bring it back. All right. Anyway,
my deepest fears.
We're looking at a mast and light falling up. Anyway, we're going on. Okay, last topic. The idea. So cannabis. So you would agree that cannabis is fine for you. Don't want it being used during training.
Nope.
Fine to use after training. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
specifically around CBD. I'm not certain that I don't think that CBD has to be withheld during activity because there are no psychoactive effects to it. It can cause muscle relaxation though, which may inhibit somebody from feeling pain. But do you train with Advil? Are you okay with somebody training with Advil?
So the other component, and you might know more about this than I do, but I was reading about how your brain learns and absorbs information, and they said that if you learn something high, you're actually better able to remember it while you're also in that same state. I don't know how true that is.
Muscle memory is important.
Yep.
So what brings people to a memory is that same being in that same circumstance.
Yes.
The neural connections connect when you're in that state.
Yep. So when I get a fighter training, ideally they come into the gym listening to the music they're going to walk into the ring to.
Smart.
They wear the clothes that they're going to fight in.
Really?
They don't wear their shirt when they're sparring because they're not going to wear a shirt when they fight. They are as close to the state that they're going to be in when they compete as possible. I actually read about the Soviet boxing team. So the Soviet boxing team was despised across the world. So they were going to get booed wherever they went. So the coaches played a soundtrack of booing and heckling so that they compete and train in the same. Exactly. So if we're not going to fight high, if we're not going to compete high, I don't want you training high. I want you in the same exact mental state that you're going to be in, or as close to it as possible.
We do that in in academia. I'm going, this is totally horrible. We're talking about fighting, and I'm saying that's how we prep for our exams.
There is
we do the
fighting.
Same thing. 6 months before, we don't even look at a book. It's all rewriting exams.
And fighting is
muscle memory.
It is the most cerebral thing I have ever done.
Cerebral.
You know, I have a history and a literature degree, and I did not put nearly the amount of thought or effort into writing an essay about Virginia Woolf that I do into thinking about what's that?
You wrote about Virginia Woolf. That's a great name to pull out. It's awesome.
It was memorable because I hated it.
Right. Okay. I'm just
it was one of the things that pushed me away from literature in general.
Yeah.
But I've thought far more about fighting. I really believe it is more cerebral than it is physical as a sport. And that I'll have people that maybe disagree with me. And this is not arrogance. I would defy somebody that is successful in this sport to say the same thing. I have never heard a successful coach or successful athlete say that this isn't the most cerebral thing that they've ever done. I think about guys like Greg Jackson and Firas Zahabi that produce world champions. Or John Danaher, you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. He was a philosophy professor at Columbia that lost interest in that and moved towards jiu-jitsu, and he approaches it the same way. What a cool sport where you get to think that much.
So that brings me to my next point or next topic, and we were just sort of hitting on this earlier on, and so it is cerebral. We agree that the more experience you have in it, probably the better off you are. Doesn't really matter how big you are. I mean, we used to see Dan Severn lose all the time at the end.
It's what I say if technique comes into play, size does matter, right? If you have two athletes of the same skill set and knowledge base, that's why they have weight classes, because it does matter. Although it matters more in striking than it does in grappling. There's an interesting component of grappling where they have the absolute division, and the absolute division is open weight class, and you don't even usually see the heavyweights winning. It's really cool when you see a rooster weight, 125-pound munchkin go in and wrap up a heavyweight and choke him out. And that happens. That happens quite a bit.
They use them as a jungle gym.
Exactly. It's like, what's that saying? If size mattered in the fight, the elephant would be the king of the jungle, not the lion.
That's right. For sure. Well, my point is things like cannabis or things like even testosterone, I'm not putting them in the same class at all, that are now allowing fighters to fight longer on in their careers.
Yep.
Does that put them at an advantage from a younger fighter who doesn't have the same maybe it's not technical skill, doesn't have that same cerebral thought? And what do we do about that?
You turn this on the head in a way that I haven't heard before, and it got me thinking, because you're absolutely right. And I've said this before, you see MMA athletes reaching their peak later than you see boxers, later than you see track athletes, because the mental side matters.
Yes.
So you are looking at a number of UFC champions that are in their mid to late 30s. That's not unusual.
Really? And I could still fight?
Well, no, because I mean we're not starting in the mid to late 30s.
I'm not starting. Hey, we went through it.
I know, but you're starting professionally.
Yeah, I would.
So yeah, the experience does matter, and if you're using something like testosterone, where now you have the benefit of the younger body as well as the benefit of the older, more experienced mind, that is absolutely an unfair advantage. Okay. Now, if you're talking, Andre, who was supposed to be here today but bailed on both of us.
Right. Yeah.
I love the guy.
Can we just talk about why he fucking bailed? Ugh, jar it. He bailed. Why? Because he's doing the Pan Am Games and he can't miss a half hour of his training. He wouldn't even miss his training. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
I think he probably didn't feel like doing it. I think it's a handy excuse that it's at the same time, to play devil's advocate, he's getting ready for a major competition, and he's got a delicate mental
advocate right now.
Well, he's got a delicate mental sensibility, so
all
he needs
the time.
I know, he's like a little flower.
Yes, all day. So now enough with the devil's advocate. So what do you really think?
I wish he was here.
Okay, me
too. I wish he was here.
That's.
I hope he does listen to this because I love the guy. I just wish I saw him more.
Yes.
I wish I saw him more. And I know he's got a lot on the go. And sometimes he doesn't like to do things like this, but I do. He is smart and he's interesting and he's got a great perspective. I would have loved to chat with him today.
Yeah, and I think he's.
But you look at a guy like Andre. He's a world champion.
Yes, he is.
But he's a world champion in his age group, which is 30 to 35. So if you're talking about that. Now, if they're adding testosterone, okay, that seems fair. That as long as it's not prohibited, and both athletes have the opportunity to do that, now you're dealing with an equal playing field mentally and physically, and I am okay with that. It's when you have a disparity where one athlete has an unfair advantage. Is
age an unfair advantage?
Experience is.
Yes.
It's an unfair advantage if you're also supplementing the physical side. That's where you're getting kind of the benefit of both. That's what the unfair advantage is. Do you know who Dan Gable is?
No.
Dan Gable is he's an American wrestler. He won the Olympics.
Sounds familiar.
He's a very famous wrestler.
Yeah, of course.
Iowa coach.
Yeah. Sorry.
So he was competing in the 60s before steroids were illegal, but after they knew what they were. Right. So he was competing against a Soviet guy. He said, I knew he was juicing. I knew he was juicing. But he said that gave me an advantage because mentally he didn't think he could beat me without steroids. So there's a fracture point there. There's something weak there that I can break if I push hard enough. Oh man, I like that. I read that when I was in university.
He wrote a book.
He did. He's
That's where I got
I can't remember he's a fascinating guy.
It wasn't Men of the Mat. What was that?
It might have been. There's a few books about him. His life is.
Maybe it was in Men of the Mat. When I used to wrestle in high school,
you talk about PTSD. His sister was raped and murdered when she was young, and he was very young. It was before high school, and to deal with it, he moved into her room in their house and lived in her room, and I think that was very much a motivating factor in why he became such a great wrestler. Sure. But he's somebody that I admired and looked up to. And what I took away from that, the reason I found wrestling appealing, the reason I find grappling and fighting appealing is because I am testing myself against you. What I'm bringing to the table, the work that I've done versus what you're bringing to the table and the work that you've done. And if I'm supplementing something, that's not me. That's not what I'm bringing to the table.
Right.
And I would never have touched anything that I thought would give me an unfair advantage because it would have tainted it for me. Even if nobody else knew, I would have known.
So that's the Olympic ideal. Right, that's the Baron de Coubertin's overall back, the rejuvenation of the Olympics was.
You read about the social class with
the amateur idea of fair game, fair play, but it doesn't exist, does it? Everybody's looking for some leverage.
Yeah,
and I think fair play is get on the mat, work hard.
Yep.
Exercise your body to a point. Or to whatever point you want. That's the fair play. You're both at the same advantage. If we start adding things in, does that put you at a disadvantage? Or put you at does that add an advantage to it? So that's where I'm trying to wrap my head around.
I read a really interesting idea. I was reading about game theory, and they talked about fair play. And they said, so if fair play, if that's the goal, what you need to do is open up everything to everybody. That's the only way to ensure fair play.
Right.
So if everybody can do everything, you can eat whatever you want, you can do whatever drugs you want, you can be supplemented stunted and doped up to your gills, that's fair because everybody has the same opportunity, and we all know that we're on the same playing field. But where we have the rewards, I do agree with that, by the way. So do I. It made so much sense. They said when you have the rewards outweighing the punishment by this amount, Lance Armstrong cheated every time, and he had to because we all know the stats. Everybody did. They all did. They all doped. But the amount of rewards that he got from those wins are still not outweighed by the punishment. So you either have to make the punishment so bad that the rewards aren't worth it, right? You will never do the sport again. You're vilified publicly. You will never compete in anything again. Maybe then. Right. But even then, you have to be able to catch people doing it. And the science, did you see the movie Icarus?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
It's about the Russian doping scandal.
Oh, maybe maybe I didn't.
So you should check it out, especially because it pertains to a lot of what we're talking about today.
You've seen it?
Fascinating.
Where do you see all this shit stuff?
It is.
Really?
It's not even close.
I just watched Don't Speak.
I mean, he's the one that uncovered
the depth of the systemic Russian doping scandal.
Really?
And what comes out is that the science is ahead of the science of cheating is ahead of the science of catching cheaters.
Right.
And it is years apart.
Really?
Where if you have the right scientist and the right timing, the reason the Russians kind of got caught is because Putin was so aggressive about Sochi that he said, I don't want them cycling off. I want to win every medal. So I want these guys juiced up when they're competing. So they found ways to actually smuggle urine in and out. But beyond that, if they're not going that far, if you're just cycling off before competition, you can compete clean and train dirty for a long time.
Right.
So
sure
if you really want that fair playing field,
you got to just legalize. You got to
say
you've got to make it all. You've got to make it all
go
legal.
crazy, or you deal with an imperfect world.
Prohibitionist world, anyways. Well, I'm not a prohibitionist.
Did you ever watch Pride?
Yeah.
We were talking beforehand about the choke. Pride was unashamedly open about do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can see we don't test. And I've actually had fighters. I had a little bit of a moral quandary where I had a fighter competing in Russia where the promoter said to him, just so you know, we don't test. We don't test at all. Go do whatever you want with that information. And then he comes to me and he's like, so
what should I do?
So what should I do? So what should I do? And I struggle with this. I talked to my dad about it, but I said,
fair play.
Why, if it's open, why would we not use every advantage that we can? Right? I still struggle with this. I still don't know if it was the right message to send to him, but this guy is dealing with world-class competition, fighting in the UFC. He got cut by the UFC and is trying to get his way back, and he has an opportunity to compete somewhere that it is legal.
I call that willful blindness.
Willful blindness in what regard?
So, the idea of knowing something exists and that it's happening, this puts you as a coach. That's where it puts you. That's really the question that it comes down to.
Yes.
Is willful blindness. Is I want to do what's in the best interest. At the end of the day, you want to do what's in the best interest of your athlete.
Yes.
And if you're doing all these other things to give them that edge, that's not in the best interest of the athlete because it's going to harm them health-wise,
and if they get caught, it's going to damage their career.
It's going to damage everything.
Their reputation, everything.
Right. So it's not in the best interest of that person, but you can get away with it in this circumstance because nobody is really looking that way. So I'm going to say, I know it shouldn't happen, but I'm just going to let that happen anyways because it doesn't matter for that circumstance.
Yes.
So that's willful blindness.
It's still on the
spectrum of wrong.
So the way I looked at it, and I don't like the idea of willful blindness, and maybe it's because I'm a control freak, but I want I've never had an athlete come to me and tell me that they're juicing, and if they did, I would push hard to get them off of it.
Because I don't like that either. It puts me in a shitty situation.
But so we talked about Pride. So the rules in Pride allowed soccer kicks to the head of a downed opponent.
Right, I remember that.
Expressly forbidden in UFC.
Well,
I don't even think it's that. I don't think it's that crazy of a
it's bad.
thing. It can be. It can be.
Somebody does not know when to stop.
That's what the ref is there for.
Yeah, but they're
So let me ask you this.
In Pride, do you remember Pride, watching Pride? So there'd be 10 kicks to a head before you were stopped.
You know who got it the worst too? The Japanese fighters.
Yeah.
Because the Japanese refs would be trying to give them a chance to stay in the fight.
That's right.
And if you ever watched Sakuraba fight, I love that guy. I was convinced I was going to see him die in the ring.
Yeah.
Because the refs wouldn't protect him and he wouldn't protect himself. So I take that same athlete to Japan.
Yeah.
And soccer kicks are allowed in this league only. Do I tell him not to throw those kicks?
Yeah.
Right? That would be that would be criminal negligence if I tried to convince him to do that.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about a situation where you know the athlete that he's competing against has this opportunity, but I feel a little icky about it, but it's allowed in this league. Am I doing my due diligence as a coach if I tell him that I don't want him to do it? Because I have a personal feeling about this, but I'm putting him in harm's way. I have no problem putting him in that ring to fight.
But and if you tell him to hold that back, you're now putting him in more
at a disadvantage.
Way.
Exactly.
Total disadvantage.
This is why it was such a moral quandary for me.
That's
I literally lost sleep over this, and ultimately I felt that doing my job, keeping him safe, giving him the best opportunity to win, we do whatever we can in this league to win. Whatever's allowed in the rules, I will advocate for. If they came out tomorrow and said the UFC is now
allowing
drug bonanza, you can go crazy.
You can poke eyes.
Am I going to say, well, not for us guys? Of course not. I'm going to look at.
Do you say I'm not partaking in something like that? Do you stick to a ground? I do it with cannabis all the time, where we're stuck in a. I know we're talking fighting and we're talking cannabis and we're talking about
these are interesting conversations. I like this stuff.
In my mind, I see it as: do I send somebody to a dispensary knowing that it's wrong but it's still beneficial, or do I make them go to a licensed producer? And so I really want to send somebody to a dispensary because I don't see a problem with it as long as there's proper regulation.
Yeah.
But I'm stuck in a current situation where I can't, and if I do, it could be considered willful blindness because I'm sending them to somebody that's illegal even though they're getting something they need. So I'm stuck in a similar position where I say then I'm just not going to partake in that situation until it's rectified because I believe in a moral. You still have to have a stance.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to have a fighter that's going to do it anyways, now we're talking harm reduction.
If I had a fighter that I knew was juicing, and I talked to them about it and they refuse to stop, they are not welcome on my team.
Right.
I will not have cheaters on my team. It's not what I'm about. It's not what the team's about.
But if it's all legal, then it's not cheating.
That's it.
So I'm in the same position. I hear you. I don't know what I don't know. There's no good answer.
Listen, it's like I said. I legitimately lost sleep over it, and I still.
Well, that's good. At least as a coach, you thought about it.
But I still don't sit here saying, "Well, I know I did the right thing." I do the best I can with the information that I have and with the moral compass that I try to follow.
Right.
And sometimes I'm wrong and sometimes I fail.
Kick him to the goddamn head.
As hard as you can.
As hard as you can. But just do it once.
That's right. Just one time, just so he knows.
Just one time. Or you just tap him. Tap his head.
No, we're going to put the shin through that temple.
Yeah, of course you are.
Yeah.
That's the goal. That's the sport, right?
I want the frontal lobe stick right here.
Sure. Is it a sport? Well, why not? Why wouldn't you? Is it a sport? Is it a sport?
MMA?
Or
yes.
Is it fighting?
So it's a sport.
That comes down to
it is a sport.
You talked about it before saying it's fight. You're using the word for it. Is it a sport?
So yeah, this is a very interesting, and maybe it's because I'm so deep in the sport, but there's these little gray areas of nuances between the two. So grappling is not a fight.
Right.
Okay, it is a sport. MMA, boxing, kickboxing, you're getting punched, you're getting kicked, and for me the distinction is your ability to choose the level of consequences. In grappling, like we talked about, I get you in a knee bar, say, ooh, I don't like the way that feels. I tap out before my hamstring rips. In a kickboxing fight, I throw a head kick and your hand drops. You have a broken jaw whether you want to or not, whether I want to or not.
Right.
There is an element of chaos. There's a lack of control in a fight that you don't see in grappling. You just don't see the same thing. And the difference between MMA as a sport and a street fight, I've got a business partner, Lucas, who is he is one of the very few people on the face of the earth that I would not fight. He's a sweetheart.
Is that the bigger dude?
Bigger dude.
He's a big dude.
He is, and it's not even that. His comfort level with violence is way beyond mine. I have fought on the street.
Is he Russian?
No, he's
reminds me of my Sistema guys.
He is, but he's okay. You ever watch online where you see like Russian fights.
They just
It's unbelievable how
Yeah.
prepared everybody is to be violent. Everybody walking around,
even the people watching,
and they're so casual about it until it's time to knock somebody out, and then they'll go do that.
Yeah.
But it's just part of their day-to-day life.
That's right.
And there's no compunction about it. That's where Lucas falls.
It's almost like psychotic. It's a
little psychotic break.
Yeah, it is.
He's one of my best friends.
The smile will kill you with a smile.
He'll knock you out grinning.
And be 100%. Should be Russian.
Sincere about it. So that fight, that willingness to do harm, takes it beyond just a sport. In a sport, Hickson, we talked about Hickson Gracie. Hickson said, if we're fighting for money, I'll stop hitting you when you ask me to. If we're fighting for honor, I'll stop hitting you when I feel like it. That's the difference between the sport and the fight. I am moving as aggressively away from fighting as I can. I've been in lots of street fights. That's not what I want to be about. That's not who I want to be. But fighting as a sport, I love. And I'll do that with people that I trust in an environment that is safe, where I know that I'm not going to hurt anybody seriously, and I'm not going to get hurt seriously, and I'm not going to end up in jail afterwards because I like to fight.
So, I mean, what I love about listening to this is that cannabis just brings it all together. Why? Because, I mean, on one hand, you love to fight and you love the sport. You're moving away from the fight and you're moving to the sport. But then you vape a little bit, you eat a little cannabis, and all you want to do is hug it out.
It's true. It's true.
It makes you cerebral, so you think about the game more.
It takes the edge off, too. Yeah, for sure.
And so I think at the end of the day, I'm not opposed to, I think CBD, and I'm glad that they've allowed CBD in amateur and pro fighting. They've taken it off. WADA's taken it off, off the banned substance list. I appreciate the fact that you want your athletes to fight the same way that they're going to fight game day. And that's science. That's pure science. That's muscle memory.
It's coaching 101.
Yeah.
It's
the way that you're going to test is the way that you got to train. At least at a certain point, and you go through those 3 levels of the learning, and then I don't know. Anyway,
I've got a question for you. This is just something I thought of. So my sister had a congenital heart defect, and she had to have a pacemaker put in, and she was on beta blockers. And one of the things that came up when she was on beta blockers is one of the doctors told her that he would take beta blockers before a test, because it gets rid of the fight or flight response. You can just
banned substance,
mellow.
By the way.
Is it? So would that be? Is that like
banned substance?
So you're cheating if you do that?
Yes.
Really? For the same reason? Because you have to have access to that information under pressure?
Well, because what it does, by decreasing it decreases the tension around your arteries, decreases your heart rate, and blood pressure,
which is why she was on it,
right? So so it causes that calming effect, and that effect is a.
But would it be banned? I mean, I understand why it's banned.
For example, if you look at those tightrope walkers and stuff, like they all take beta blockers. Anytime that there's a concentration factor,
or like shooters,
hence beta blocker. It decreases tension on your vessels, which decreases your blood pressure and causes you to causes a calming effect. That calming effect is a performance enhancer.
So would you have a problem ethically with a doctor taking beta blockers before a test?
No. Maybe. Yes.
So,
I don't know.
But I mean,
God damn it.
But if we're thinking about that, like, because if you're, I mean, you work in the ER, right?
Sorry.
So you've got high pressure situations. I know I've spoken to you a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in a Hamilton ER.
Yeah.
It gets dicey.
Yeah, sure does.
So if you've been tested with beta blockers, where you have easy access to this information, you're nice and calm, you know exactly what to do, and then you're put in that same situation with all these other stressors. Somebody's got a knife, somebody just got stabbed, they're screaming, and you have to make that same decision. Isn't that more damaging to the society as a whole than a fighter who's taking some kind of performance-enhancing drug?
Right. So for me, at the end of the day, is I'm trained to act under pressure. I don't need a beta blocker. It won't change my activity level. It won't change. For me, I feel fine. That's why, like the military and in medicine and in fighting, that's why you train for game day.
Yep.
So for me, I take a beta. I don't want to know what the beta. I don't want to know what it feels like. I know how to act in that situation. So I don't want that beta blocker. Maybe it'll help me. Maybe it won't. But I'm prepared. So if I come in prepared to expect X, I know how to deal with X because I've dealt with it 1,000 times already, so I don't need a beta blocker. Now, can it be considered a performance enhancer? Sure. Are people who go into surgery, could it potentially steady their hand more? Well, it can calm the surgeon down, but hopefully that surgeon is trained long and hard enough they don't need a beta blocker
to do their job. Hopefully.
That's my answer.
I'd rather have a surgeon that doesn't need a beta blocker.
You're right.
Performing surgery on me.
The same reason you said that if you believe you need a steroid to beat me,
there's a fracture point there.
There's a fracture point.
Yep.
And so for me in medicine, I don't need that. And hopefully your athletes, they don't need that. And because that creates a fracture point, says you can't do it on your own.
Yep.
So that's where I stand on the situation. You actually you said it. It's exactly what it is. It's that fracture point. If you think you need that to beat me, then I beat you already.
Then your game's done. You're going to break.
You're going to break. Right. Because what happens the moment you don't get it? What happens the moment that beta blocker wears off?
Or you feel weak.
Or you feel
like maybe, oh man, maybe he is stronger than me.
That's
even
right.
though I'm on something.
That's right.
You're gonna crumble.
That's right.
Exactly. Dan Gable won that Olympics without giving up a single point.
Right.
Won a gold medal without giving up a single point in the 60s. Impressive guy.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you coming on here today.
This is awesome. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, great conversation. Cannabis in sport. We spoke about doping in sport. We spoke about opioids in sport. We spoke about sport in general. Overall, cannabinoids our body produces the same stuff that's in the plant. Nothing more, nothing less. We don't produce terpenes, but we definitely produce the same endocannabinoids, the same stuff like THC and CBD. We produce that ourselves, and sometimes our body needs help regulating that. CBD, for example, is a muscle relaxer. It helps muscle recovery, and it also helps collagen formation post-exercise. So after you've broken down that muscle and you need to regenerate the muscle, it can help with that as well. It helps bone formation. It helps bone growth, and that's all CBD related. And THC, on the flip side of that, does things as well. I mean, it's super important for pain modulation. And actually, I actually meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about attention and on the last note, attention and what was the other one?
Oh, diet.
No, attention, and there's one other one. I have it in here. So, focus. That's the word. See, clearly. Attention and focus. There's actually a study. The results aren't published yet, but you can. I was just online on Health Canada's website, at Clinical Trials website. They just finished a study on using Sativex, which is a CBD THC combination in patients with attention deficit and attention difficulties. I don't know the results of it, but it's going to come out.
Interesting.
So can cannabis be used in sport? It should be. Opioids is a huge issue right now. I think maybe one of the things that we need to do is talk about it and not be afraid to talk to our athletes about addiction in general, because they probably have addiction to more than just opioids. And cannabinoids is a safe alternative. I'm glad WADA has taken it off, and I'm glad you're a proponent of it. And it was awesome having you here, and I hope you can come on again.
Thank you so much. That was a great time.
And I'll bring a mat next time. Okay. That you can roll with this guy. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're done.